shockwaves are rocking the world of MAGA churches as Pastor Creflo Dollar, one of America's most prominent and controversial faith leaders, finds himself at the center of a deeply troubling scandal. Known for his flamboyant lifestyle, prosperity gospel teachings, and once highly publicized private jet fundraising campaigns, Dollar now faces allegations that strike at the heart of his reputation and ministry. According to reports, a 911 call from Dollar's teenage daughter accused him of assault claims that allege physical abuse, including being struck and choked, while Dollar has publicly denied the accusations, calling them exaggerated and insisting they were misunderstood. The damage to his image is undeniable. This is more than a headline. It's a crisis that threatens the trust of congregants, the loyalty of supporters, and the credibility of a ministry that has spanned decades. For years, Dollar has presented himself as a beacon of faith, teaching prosperity and success as signs of divine favor. But the recent allegations raise serious questions about accountability, leadership, and the gap between public persona and private actions. Supporters are left shocked and divided, while critics argue that the scandal is emblematic of broader issues in MAGA church culture, particularly the dangers of unchecked power and wealth. As legal proceedings and investigations unfold, the story of Creflo Dollar serves as a reminder that even the most influential spiritual leaders are not immune to controversy. It is a dramatic turning point for a man whose life has always been in the public eye, a moment that will test the strength of his faith, the loyalty of his followers, and the resilience of his ministry. In the coming weeks, every move Dollar makes will be scrutinized. The headlines are no longer about sermons, donations, or jet campaigns. They are about allegations that could redefine his legacy forever. For followers, critics, and the curious public alike, one question looms large: how will Pastor Creflo Dollar survive the most devastating chapter of his life? Creflo Dollar has spent decades building an empire. From a small congregation in Georgia to one of the largest MAGA churches in America, World Changers Church International became a symbol of prosperity, faith, and the audacious teachings of its founder. Dollar's message was simple: faith brings abundance. His sermons inspired millions, and his personal life jets, luxury cars, and high-profile appearances was both admired and criticized. Yet nothing in his career could have prepared him for the storm that erupted on that fateful day. The allegations began quietly, through a 911 call that would change the narrative surrounding Dollar forever. His teenage daughter reportedly called authorities, claiming that during a domestic dispute, she was physically assaulted by her father. The claims were severe, being punched, choked, and thrown to the ground. Details emerged slowly, but were shocking enough to catch the attention of national media and church members alike. For a pastor whose teachings emphasized faith, morality, and divine favor, this revelation was explosive. Dollar's initial response was public denial. He described the accusations as exaggerated and sensationalized, explaining that any marks visible on his daughter were due to a long-standing skin condition. Supporters and critics alike were left grappling with the tension between the man they saw on stage and the allegations now dominating headlines. Social media erupted, with debates over credibility, morality, and accountability spreading like wildfire. Within hours, the story became more than a family dispute. It was a national conversation about leadership, power, and the responsibility of spiritual figures. Questions about Dollar's wealth and the controversial fundraising for his private jet resurfaced, compounding the scrutiny. Critics pointed to years of opulent displays and prosperity gospel teachings as evidence of a man who had placed himself above reproach. For many supporters, the news was a betrayal, leaving them uncertain whether the pastor they admired could also be capable of the alleged actions. Internally, the church faced its own crisis. Staff, volunteers, and congregants struggled to reconcile their faith in Dollar with the allegations. Meetings were called, statements were drafted, and attempts were made to maintain order within the ministry. Yet the tension was palpable. Loyalty clashed with doubt, and faith confronted reality in an uncomfortable and painful way. For Dollar himself, the situation was a turning point. Even as he denied wrongdoing, he understood that his reputation, legacy, and ministry were on the line. Every sermon, interview, and public appearance would now be examined through the lens of these allegations. His life, once defined by authority and influence, had become a story of crisis, scrutiny, and uncertainty. In the days that followed, media outlets dissected every detail. Experts weighed in on both the legal and moral implications, and the public watched closely. Donations to the church, once steady and generous, faced potential decline. Congregants wrestled with faith and doubt, questioning whether the man they followed had truly lived by the principles he preached. As the investigation unfolded, one truth became clear: this was no ordinary scandal. For Creflo Dollar, the allegations were a devastating blow, one that threatened not only his career, but the very foundation of the ministry he had built. And for a leader whose life had always been in the public eye, the coming weeks would test his resilience, his faith, and the loyalty of those who had followed him for decades. The story of Creflo Dollar had entered a new, perilous chapter, a chapter filled with uncertainty, scrutiny, and consequences that would reverberate far beyond the walls of World Changers Church International. The allegations against Pastor Creflo Dollar did more than shock the public. They sparked a whirlwind of legal scrutiny, media attention, and congregational uncertainty. Within hours of the 911 call, authorities began investigating the claims, interviewing family members, staff, and witnesses. What had once been a story of spiritual leadership and prosperity was now a narrative dominated by questions of accountability, morality, and legality. For Dollar, the investigation was a test unlike any he had faced. Police reports detailed the alleged events, physical altercations during a family dispute, including choking and striking his daughter, while Dollar continued to deny wrongdoing, insisting the marks were caused by a skin condition. Investigators had to navigate a complex web of statements, evidence, and public opinion. The church that once seemed untouchable suddenly faced intense scrutiny from every angle. Within the ministry, tension ran high. Staff meetings were filled with whispered conversations, uncertain glances, and anxious attempts to manage a crisis that seemed larger than anyone had anticipated. Volunteers and congregants struggled with conflicting emotions: loyalty to their pastor versus concern over the serious allegations. Some sought guidance from church leadership on how to respond publicly, while others quietly questioned whether their faith in Dollar could remain unshaken. Media outlets amplified the story, dissecting every statement and historical controversy surrounding Dollar. His past fundraising campaigns, including the infamous push for a private jet, resurfaced as critics drew connections between lavish spending and leadership responsibility. Social media became a battleground, with supporters defending Dollar's character and detractors questioning how a man of faith could face such serious accusations. The conversation went beyond the individual case. It sparked a national debate about accountability in mega churches and the responsibility of religious leaders to maintain moral authority. The public scrutiny also affected Dollar personally. Reports suggest the pastor felt the pressure acutely, balancing the stress of legal investigation with the demands of leading a large congregation. Every sermon, interview, and public appearance became an opportunity for both support and criticism. Friends and family reportedly offered advice, but the weight of reputation, ministry, and legacy rested squarely on his shoulders. Meanwhile, congregants faced difficult decisions. Some remained steadfast, choosing to separate the man from the allegations and maintain their faith in the church. Others felt betrayed, unsure if they could continue supporting a leader whose personal life now seemed so fraught with controversy. The church's donations, historically generous, faced potential decline as trust wavered. Programs, events, and outreach initiatives risked disruption amid the growing tension and uncertainty. Even beyond the church walls, the story resonated. Commentators, legal experts, and faith leaders weighed in, discussing the broader implications for megachurches and the prosperity gospel movement. Allegations of abuse within religious institutions are always delicate, but the high profile of Dollar's ministry made this case particularly consequential. It forced the public to question what happens when spiritual authority clashes with personal accountability, and how followers can reconcile faith with moral responsibility. For Dollar, the stakes were clear. His legacy, influence, and ministry hung in the balance. The investigation was ongoing, and the outcomes were uncertain. Yet one thing was undeniable: the events had reshaped his public image and created a watershed moment in his career. The scandal would be remembered not merely as a personal crisis, but as a turning point for a ministry, a congregation, and a broader conversation about leadership, accountability, and faith in the modern era. As the days stretched into weeks, the tension only grew. Church leaders worked to maintain cohesion, the public followed every development, and Dollar himself faced the most significant challenge of his decades-long career. The stage was set for a story of confrontation, reflection, and the possibility of redemption or irreparable damage. The allegations had already changed everything. For Creflo Dollar, the coming months would determine whether his ministry could survive the storm or if the once powerful pastor's reputation would crumble under the weight of devastating truth. The storm surrounding Pastor Creflo Dollar did not remain confined to courtrooms or church offices. It spilled into the public domain, igniting debates across social media, news outlets, and faith communities worldwide. The allegations had already shaken congregants, but now the court of public opinion weighed in, amplifying scrutiny and placing Dollar's leadership under intense examination. Social media erupted with commentary. Supporters defended Dollar fiercely, citing his decades of ministry, charitable work, and ability to inspire faith in millions. They argued that the allegations were either exaggerated or part of a misunderstanding, emphasizing the pastor's decades-long commitment to spiritual guidance. Yet critics were equally vocal, questioning how a man preaching moral authority could be accused of actions so antithetical to his message. Hashtags, viral posts, and heated online debates painted a portrait of a ministry divided, with loyalty and doubt locked in an ongoing struggle. The scandal also forced religious leaders and commentators to reflect on accountability in mega churches. For many, Dollar's situation was emblematic of broader systemic issues: immense power concentrated in the hands of a single individual, minimal oversight, and the challenges of transparency within vast organizations. Critics argued that when spiritual leaders amass wealth and influence, the consequences of misconduct become far-reaching, affecting congregants, staff, and the wider faith community. Dollar's private jet campaigns and flashy lifestyle became symbolic of excess in a religious context, a stark contrast to the moral guidance expected from someone of his stature. Within World Changers Church International, the atmosphere was tense. Leaders struggled to maintain cohesion while congregants wrestled with conflicting emotions. Some remained loyal, holding tightly to their faith and continuing to support church initiatives. Others quietly stepped away, uncertain whether their allegiance should withstand the allegations. Donation patterns began to shift, and programs that relied on steady funding faced the risk of disruption. The church, once seen as unshakable, now found itself navigating uncharted waters, balancing faith, leadership, and reputation management. Creflo Dollar himself became the focus of unprecedented scrutiny. Every sermon, public statement, and interview was dissected, leaving little room for privacy or error. In interviews, Dollar sought to defend himself, asserting that the allegations were misrepresented and that his actions were misinterpreted. Yet, the narrative had already taken root in the public consciousness: the juxtaposition of a prosperity-preaching pastor with claims of abuse made headlines around the globe, drawing the attention of both critics and followers. Legal advisors, public relations teams, and church leadership were forced to collaborate under pressure, carefully crafting responses while investigations continued. Every public statement became a strategic decision, aimed at preserving credibility while avoiding further legal complications. Yet for Dollar, the personal toll was immense. He faced not only legal challenges, but also the emotional weight of public judgment, the concern of family, and the fear that years of work and reputation could unravel in a matter of days. Meanwhile, news coverage intensified. Stories detailed the events leading up to the 911 call, examined Dollar's past controversies, and analyzed the potential impact on the prosperity gospel movement. Talk shows, news networks, and online publications debated the implications for megachurches nationwide, turning Dollar's personal crisis into a broader conversation about faith, leadership, and accountability. The tragedy of the situation was clear. The allegations, regardless of their legal outcome, had forever altered public perception. Dollar's influence was being tested in ways that fame, wealth, and decades of ministry could not shield him from. The story became a cautionary tale of how personal actions intersect with public responsibility, and how trust once broken is difficult to restore. For Creflo Dollar, the path forward remained uncertain. Congregants, media, and critics watched closely, waiting for developments that would determine whether his ministry could withstand the scrutiny, or whether the scandal would leave permanent scars on his legacy. The crisis had reached a pivotal point where every decision, every statement, and every public appearance carried profound consequences. The pastor who once commanded admiration and authority now faced a profound reckoning, forced to navigate a landscape filled with suspicion, criticism, and deep emotional stakes. What had begun as an allegation within a family had transformed into a public ordeal with the potential to redefine the life and career of one of America's most recognizable spiritual leaders. The storm surrounding Pastor Creflo Dollar continued to grow, leaving consequences that rippled far beyond his family and congregation. What began as a shocking allegation had now become a full-blown crisis, testing not only his personal resilience, but the very foundation of World Changers Church International. For Dollar, every public appearance, every statement, and every interaction became a potential flashpoint. The legal ramifications were immediate. Authorities scrutinized the claims of abuse, interviewing witnesses and evaluating evidence. Even as Dollar maintained his innocence, the shadow of investigation cast a pall over his ministry. For a leader whose life had always been under public scrutiny, the experience was a stark reminder of the fragility of reputation. Every misstep, perceived or real, was amplified by media coverage and social media chatter, leaving Dollar to navigate a delicate balance between defending himself and protecting his congregation. Within the church, the atmosphere was tense and uncertain. Staff meetings became a place of strategic planning, pastoral guidance, and emotional support. Congregants wrestled with difficult choices: continue supporting a leader they admired, or step back amid growing concerns. Some rallied behind Dollar, emphasizing faith and forgiveness. Others quietly distanced themselves, unwilling to reconcile their loyalty with the gravity of the allegations. Donation patterns began to fluctuate, programs faced delays, and church leaders were forced to address both internal anxiety and external scrutiny simultaneously. The public fallout was equally intense. News outlets dissected Dollar's every move, analyzing past controversies, his teachings on prosperity, and his lifestyle choices. Analysts debated the larger implications for megachurches, questioning accountability structures and the potential dangers of concentrated authority. Within religious organizations, social media amplified every angle, with hashtags, viral posts, and heated discussions further polarizing supporters and critics. For Dollar, it was a lesson in modern fame. The court of public opinion could be as powerful and unforgiving as any legal tribunal. Amid this turmoil, Dollar faced a deeply personal reckoning. The allegations had forced him to confront not only public perception, but also the internal consequences of leadership, power, and responsibility. Sources close to him suggested that the pastor was reflecting on his decades-long career, the decisions he had made, and the way his actions intersected with the lives of others. For a man who built his ministry on principles of faith and divine favor, the crisis became an opportunity to evaluate the alignment between his public teachings and private behavior. Some attempted to frame this period as a moment for potential redemption. Dollar publicly reaffirmed his commitment to his faith, his congregation, and his family, emphasizing lessons of accountability and personal growth. While critics remained skeptical, the narrative of reflection and responsibility offered a pathway toward rebuilding trust. If handled with transparency and sincerity, every sermon, statement, and outreach effort became a step in that delicate process. As Dollar sought to repair a reputation and ministry shaken to its core, yet the emotional and spiritual toll cannot be understated. Dollar, like many leaders in high-profile positions, faced isolation, intense scrutiny, and the challenge of reconciling his public persona with private struggles. Friends, advisors, and close family became critical sources of support, guiding him through legal, emotional, and strategic complexities. In many ways, the crisis became a mirror, reflecting the pressures, responsibilities, and vulnerabilities inherent in leadership, particularly when faith and personal conduct collide in the public eye. Ultimately, the story of Creflo Dollar serves as a cautionary tale. It highlights the fragile intersection of